Welcome to WhoDooTV. We are happy to have a special show. Pretty excited about it. I'm Hoosier.
I'm Jared. Yeah, it is 2/13, February 13th. Usually we talk about comic books that are coming out on Wednesdays, but we got a special show for you guys today where we are talking with the creators of White Ash, who just had a Kickstarter start yesterday on Monday. So welcome, guys. We've got Charlie Stickney and Conor Hughes on with us.
Hey, thank you for having us. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I really appreciate it.
And if you guys haven't heard of these guys, or you're a Kickstarter, haven't done Kickstarter, they recently were successful in White Ash #1 and got the joy to read that book. We enjoyed it. You guys know we only cover things we enjoy, and that's why these guys are on. And that was awesome, guys. So I loved that book. It was great. And so great job.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. It's something that Conor and I have been working on for a long time. At this point, I think it's been about a year since we first started talking to each other about doing the book. And so it was actually only a couple of weeks ago that we finally were able to send the print copies out to people. And we've just been hearing, amazing reaction, and it's been incredibly validating. So thank you again.
Yeah, not a problem. Yeah, it's our pleasure. First of all, I'd love to just have you guys talk about where you guys come from, where your, I guess, your history with comic books. What other work have you done? Anything like that? Yeah. Charlie, will you start us off here?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Well, I growing up, like so many of you, I had a real love for comics. I was an avid collector probably from about 1988 through about 2005. And then I took a little bit of a hiatus because you have family and sometimes there's other obligations there. And you think that maybe your resources would be better devoted to diapers than another bag variant cover, if you're smart and you want to keep your spouse happy. So I took a little break, but aside from comics, I'm a writer. Both for feature films and for television and animation. And so I've been doing that for a really long time. And I've been going back and forth between the different media. And I think with every project, you have to find the right home for it. And there's a lot of overlap between things that can work for film, that can work for television, that can work for animation, and things that can work for comics. And I had this idea for either a show or a comic book with White Ash. And I thought, you know what, maybe the best home for this is a comic. And so I spent a lot of time looking for just the right partner in this endeavor. And I was so incredibly fortunate to find Conor and our amazing colorist, Finn Cram, who's not here tonight, but Finn is also the best. And what you see is a year's worth of work that we've been putting together, and we're just thrilled with how it's turning out.
Yeah, I think like what I say, how we got connected was really cool. I was late at night one night just on Twitch looking up things. I put up comic books, and there's some guy just creating some comics. And when you really got to see this work, it was really good. The line work, I was really impressed by the art, and I, kind of chimed in like, "Nice work, Conor. This looks great." And then Charlie got a hold of me saying, "Hey, you do this review," and so that's how we got connected. But I mean, give it hats off. Conor, your art was kind of what caught my eye, and then got to read the book, and just a good marriage, I guess I could say.
Yeah, well, thank you, Hoosier. I mean, definitely spent a lot of time prepping all the things for book one and making sure it looked as good as it could be. It was quite an endeavor. We put a lot of effort into that first book. I think it really paid off. I think it came out really good, and I think issue 2 is even better. Like, I'm really happy with issue 2. I've been working on issue 3 since the start of the Kickstarter, and it's coming out even better, I think. So I think Charlie and I just keep on getting into a fantastic groove. Charlie, Finn, and I.
Nice.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, Conor, could you also give us kind of a history of, I guess, your relationship with comics and in the industry and everything like that?
Sure. Yeah. So like when I was growing up, I was checking out the comic book stores, but I wasn't as interested in the titles that were like sort of being shown at the time. I got really into going to the comic book stores and then checking out like art books. And so like my friends were especially really into Warhammer and things like that. And
Oh, yeah.
so I picked up a lot of the illustration books of those, like all the codexes, like the wood elves and the dwarves, like all those characters. Like I really got into that stuff, and I would like draw from those books, and I would draw from like the art for games or whatever. So I sort of took a more of an illustrative, I guess, approach to things. But then later on, then I started really getting into comics, like in high school, and reading just a lot of different kinds of materials. Like at the time, I think one I really liked was Stan Sakai's Usagi Yojimbo. I was really into that, and so sort of melding the two, like just really liking art and then really liking, like narrative, sort of brought me into going to the School of Visual Arts for cartooning, and so I was doing that for a few years, and then I went and did graphic design. I was a graphic designer at the United Nations for a while, and that was a really great experience as well. And sort of then I left that and I tried to break into comics again. So that's what I've been doing since then.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
That's awesome.
I will say that Conor is the real deal. You were getting him early on in what I think is going to be an amazing career. And in a couple of years from now, everyone's going to be talking about Conor Hughes as the hot comic book artist that you can get on your book. I have a lot of friends who work in animation, including a really good friend of mine who's an animation director who was on Black Dynamite. He was on Tron. He's going to be on the new Harley Quinn series. So he knows art. And when I was looking for an artist for White Ash, I went through about 250 people who were interested in working on the book. And my friend Nate looked at all of them and was like, no, this guy. It's like, this guy is amazing. And it's true. I mean, you can see it in the pages, and Conor keeps topping himself from issue to issue to issue. And you are watching the evolution of the next great American comic book artist. That's right.
Well, thank you, Charlie. That's high praise indeed.
That's awesome.
That is so cool. Yeah.
And I have to say, from what I believe, that is it's up there. That art quality is definitely there. That is something that we definitely noticed right off the bat.
Wait till you see what he's doing in book 3. I mean, it's like he just keeps upping his game. It's really cool.
That's awesome. And so, I mean, I guess this goes for both of you within your own art that you're doing and writing, and in the art itself. Is like, who are your inspirations? Who have you guys inspired your work by, or got you motivated to do what you do?
Charlie, you want to take it?
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, for me, when I was in high school, when I was in college, I was looking to either write comic books or write for film and television. And, I was at that crossroads, but I'll tell you, for comic books, a lot of my influences were some of the older artists. I was a huge Eisner fan. I actually did my own webcomic for a little while. I mean, I know enough about art to know that I needed someone better than me to do White Ash. I think it's always good when you know your own limitations, but it helps, especially when you're working with an artist, to know what kind of things that you should give them so they can build that world. And so for me, like, Eisner was a huge influence. And then, like, if you're looking at comic book writers, I mean, I was reading at the time, I was reading a lot of Peter David. I was reading Alan Moore, Frank Miller, Neil Gaiman, back in the day. But with film and with TV, there's so many influences. It's really hard to say. You'd have to pick an era. And if you pick an era, I mean, most of my stuff is, I did a lot of romantic comedies for a little while, or genre comedies. I mean, the genre mixing is something that I've done for a long time, because I think if you can do it right, it's hard to do right, because you have to find that tone that works. But if you can do it right, it elevates both genres when you're putting them together. But you have to walk that fine line. So for me, I mean, because I was a film major in college, there's a whole litany of different influences. Like I said, you'd have to sort of pick an era. But for comic books, Eisner was the person for me, because I think at the core of comic books, it's about visual storytelling. So you have to be clear, and then you can dress it up any way you want. But as long as the shots are conveying the meaning of the story, and adding to the emotion and the depth of what's happening, that then you know what you're doing is going to succeed. And for me, Eisner was a master of that.
Mm-hmm. He was, yeah. Yeah, I would say I definitely picked up a lot from Eisner as well. Like, and a lot of people actually, I would say like Eisner sort of had an influence on like, to me, like I could see the influence on like Kubert, and a lot, like in college, a lot of people were saying like, oh, like you draw a lot like Kubert, and I wasn't actually that big a fan of Kubert, but like I liked his work, but you know, he wasn't. I wouldn't say he's like one of my more direct influences. But it was funny that like people were saying I was going in that direction. But yeah, for me, like I would say, you know, I my influences kind of like really span. Like as you heard earlier, like I was talking about like the codexes for Warhammer or like different game manuals. But then as far as comics are concerned, like I really came to love like the Jack Kirby, the Toth, and then stuff, and then like sort of. But then I also tried to synthesize like a lot of European influence, like Hergé, like Mobius, Jacques Tardy, and then of course like Toriyama and Tomo. Like those are like the classics. And then I sort of more recently I would say Tonshi Zonchik has been like a huge influence on me. And then Corey J. Walker, I think he's just done amazing work on Invincible. Like I think that his stuff there, the last set of issues that he did just completely blew me away. Like they just showed such an understanding of so many aspects of comic like the comic craft and storytelling. I just thought it was fantastic, you know.
That's awesome. And then I guess we talk about a little bit White Ash, and the story itself and putting together is just a cool story. And I love the character of Alec. What kind of inspired you about getting Alec going there, Charlie?
Well, I come from a small town in Maine, and I think for a lot of us who come from smaller towns, you know, you always feel like there's got to be something else going on in the town, or you just don't fit. And I think it's very easy to feel like you don't fit in a small town. You feel like there's nothing going on. You've got to get out of there. And a lot of that has to do with, I think we're all looking to try to find our own sense of identity of who we are. And when you're in a small town, everybody already knows you. So it's hard to define yourself apart from those people. So, you know, so I think there's a lot at play there. And if you're smart in a small town, or you feel a little bit different in a small town, it's hard to find your place. So you're looking to go to something bigger, something better. And for Alec in White Ash, I mean, it's set in a coal mining town in Pennsylvania, a town called White Ash. And you know, for him, it's really frustrating because he's much smarter than a lot of the people that he knows, you know, and he doesn't want to work in the coal mine like his dad and his uncle and all of his dad's friends, you know, and so he's looking for something more in his life, and he's gotten accepted to Carnegie Mellon. He's going to go there. He's going to escape the town. He's going to get out. And so for him, I mean, this journey is, you know, he's on his way out of town, and then there's this accident at the mine that sort of traps him there for a couple of more days. And during this time, he uncovers this crazy secret about himself and about the town, which makes him rethink everything he's known about himself. And he's starting to figure out why he's never fit in, because a big piece of his identity was missing. And with this piece of his identity missing, you know, he can't make everything fit. And so now he's going to be set on this new journey of trying to reevaluate his life in the context. And it's going to be a question of, does he really want to leave now? Or does he want to stay in this town now that there's this whole new aspect of who he is? And so, you know, at the end of the day, it's a coming of age story. It's him trying to figure out who he is. And for all of us, you know, when we understand our past a little bit more, it helps direct where we want to go with our future. And so for Alec and White Ash and a lot of the characters in the town, you know, there's so many secrets, and it's not just this big mythos that's buried under it. You know, I like to say it's Lord of the Rings meets Romeo and Juliet in rural Pennsylvania. So, you know, like there's a lot going on there and colliding together, and we're trying to keep it all grounded. But, you know, like there's this gigantic plan. You know, hopefully we're going to be very successful with this. But right now we have at least the first 4 blocked out as a story that sort of sets the scene anyway. And, you know, so if we only did 4, it would be okay, and then people who read it would enjoy it and feel satisfied. But we have blocked out about another 30 to 40 issues, and the series can expand from there. So it's there's a lot at play, and so for me, like that core of finding who you are, it's not just Alec, it's also Lillian, who she's the young woman that Alec meets while he's stranded in town, and for her, she's someone whose dad's kept her really protected her entire life. She hasn't been able to experience the world. She hasn't been able to experience much of life outside of her dad's private compound. So for her, she's also looking to sort of forge her own identity independent from her dad. And so that's kind of what's at play with a lot of these characters. We're taking their quest for identity and intertwining it with these big secrets, which they don't know about themselves and the world. And so, all of that comes together.
Yeah, I think the characters that Charlie has drawn out here are like really well defined, and then also like they keep on getting more defined as the time goes on. But I think from the outset, you really do get a sense of, from the way he's written them, like what these characters are about and how they're going to play into the narrative. Like, so for instance, like you got the character Kat, who sort of has a bit of a thing for Alec, and like you get that like immediately. You get like there's this history to these characters that you aren't seeing, but that you immediately pick up on. And like I think the way Charlie's like done that is really masterful. I think it's really good. And then another aspect I wanted to chime in there regarding Alec was that what I really like about Alec is that he really knows sort of what he wants, even if it's not necessarily like, if that's going to change maybe in the future, that might, but right now he knows exactly what he wants. Like, so when he goes and meets with Thane at the house, like he has a mission and he's like gonna try and do it. And like I sort of really appreciated that about a character, as opposed to like a lot of stories, like the characters tend to be, if they're searching for themselves, they also tend to be a little bit more unsure of themselves. Alec is sure of himself even if he's maybe wrong, and that's okay.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean, it definitely comes out in the characters. We definitely see those types of things. I mean, it is a good book. So what is like where did this story come from? What kind of made you want to put this together? And same for you, Conor. What made you want to like be a part of this too?
Well, I mean, the way that I could see from the outset, the way Charlie had written it, that like that was, I could see how strongly written all these characters were. And I think that's what is really important in comics. I think you need those kinds of characters. And I mean, I will say, like, I think Charlie's voice comes through in no matter what he's writing. I think like when I first read the Reddit post that we hooked up with, like that thing just pops off the page. Like he just sent out today an email about the Kickstarter to all the fans, and like it just reads beautifully, and I think his writing works like that, and that's what drew me to it.
Well, and for me, like, thank you, Conor. I appreciate that. I think for me, one of the it's hard to get too much into the influence of where it came without giving away some giant spoilers about the plot line.
That's fair.
For those of you, I mean, like, you've read the first book. I don't know. Did we give you an advance copy of the second book?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So let's just say the relationship between the two characters, there's definitely a class thing going on where there's some forbidden love. And so like there's that rich and poor Romeo and Juliet, but there's also something deeper, a reason why these two characters couldn't get together. And I will say, like, that sort of conflict is what originally put the whole book in my head. I was watching a movie, and again, and without getting to this, that there were characters that were featured in that dynamic. And I said, this is a fantastic dynamic to explore. Why, it seems like there's a no-brainer that there's not a TV show or a comic book set, grounded in, say, rural Pennsylvania, featuring that dynamic, because I feel like that's something that people want to see. People have a hunger for fantasy. People have a hunger for fantasy that's done well. and but also like something that's grounded, and so that's what the dynamics of things I was trying to play with, and the reason it's set in White Ash, the reason it's set in this town, this coal mining town, that all plays into the narrative of who these characters are. So like it was that spark that I saw in that movie about the conflict, and I said there's such a potential to build a world and a show and something that in some ways was a little bit of a throwaway that was added to this movie to add some emotional depth to the characters. But for me, it was like, you can make an entire show about that, an entire book about that. So like I said, you've read the comic, so I hopefully that makes more sense. And for anyone who's watching this, if you read the first issue, you'll get at least half of that dynamic and have a pretty good idea where the second half is going.
And we highly recommend that. One thing I think was really cool is I remember on the Kickstarter, and part of the campaign was the city and the businesses. And I just think that's a clever idea because it makes White Ash itself into its own character too, which goes back to that small town that you came from. And then just the mindset of that, which brings me into the Kickstarter piece. Why did you choose to go the Kickstarter route instead of maybe asking a publisher?
Well, I'll tell you, part of it is the economics that's going on right now. And it's a real tough time for individual issue sales of comics. And where most of the money is right now is in trade paperbacks. And if you're working with a publisher, even the rate that they can pay, it's not livable. And if you want to work with a real professional who, like Conor, who's going to be able to spend the amount of time he needs, where this becomes a full-time thing, you need to have enough money coming in to, just to support that. And and I don't want to cast aspersions on any of the smaller publishers. Even something like Image, if you look at the numbers and you think about what an Image comic is doing, aside from like their top 3 or 4 titles, most of them might be in the 12,000 or less range in terms of distribution for individual issues. And then you think about what the cover price is, and you start thinking about what the that 60% of that is going to go out the door, just between Image and, Image's cut, maybe it's going to be even more than 60%, and Diamond's distribution cut. And so if you're, you're going to be, you can do the numbers in your head, and then you start thinking about splitting that amount that would be left over between a team of 3 or 4. And, even if, like the amount of time that someone like Conor needs to put in, or Finn needs to put in, you need to be able to make it a livable arrangement. So for me, we're not opposed to going to a publisher afterwards. And I think one of the great things about Kickstarter is you can build up a fan base. Right. On our first campaign, we ended up with about 325 backers. After the campaign, we probably got about another 25 to 30 fans, so about 350 people, 375 people in that range. But a lot of those backers were also friends and family that were coming out to try to support our endeavor, and that's part of what Kickstarter is. This time around, I mean, we're a day and a half in. We have over 160 backers, of which almost none of these people we know. These are people who have read the book, who want to come back. So we're building an audience for the comic, and then that's the huge part. It's a good way to reach out to people and help fund the making of the book.
Great, yeah. I mean, it's a really interesting strategy to go about. I'm just curious, has there been any precedent to this before? Has there been any comic books that have started on Kickstarter before?
Well, I will say there's actually, there's titles at Image that have done a limited run on Kickstarter and then moved to Image. There's titles at Action Lab, which have done the same thing. Titles at Black Mask, Vault. I don't know if you guys know Vault Comics.
Yep.
Do you know Heathen? You seen the title Heathen?
Yeah.
It's like a lesbian Viking title. She kickstarted her first 5 or 6 issues first, and then they went to the publisher afterwards. Because like at the end of the day, if you can get your net cost to 0, right, or lose a little bit of money, then if you go to a publisher, then the publisher, you don't need to get the same deal from the publisher right out the gate to sustain the comic, and you can be working on issue 6 and 7 while the first 4 or 5 are already in the bank, and you can hopefully start delivering a title that's on time. And by the time your 6th issue is out, you've built up enough audience that you can sustain the book. So, I mean, if you think of it as like an incubator to help find comics, and on Kickstarter, there's some really talented people that are working, and you're starting to see some of them cross over. There's also some total garbage. I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, there's both, and it's like it's hard because when you're looking at that giant mass of titles, but there's some really good work that's out there, and then there's also a lot of creators, like big name creators, like was it the Lady Death comics? I don't know, you guys know those, Lady Death? You would recognize it if you Googled it.
Okay.
It's like this white lady wearing next to nothing, and she's been doing comics for a long time. But
oh yes.
Like their Kickstarter launched like 3 or 4 days ago, and they've raised through like $130,000 because he's realized he can take his comics directly to Kickstarter, and all the fans who were buying them through Diamond Distribution and everything else can now buy them directly from him, and he keeps so much more of the money. So like there are big name people who are starting to use Kickstarter as their distribution model rather than going through a publisher. So like it's like you're starting to see some overlap going back and forth because people are realizing there's a sort of big audience out there, and they can directly talk to their fans.
That is great. So
yeah, that's really fascinating.
Yeah, and just looking here that you guys are 80% after 1 day or more. So,
well, thank you. Thank you for people who've been championing us. We've got some really good early advance reviews already in from like Comics Bastards and Graphic Policy and Rogue's Portal. That review has a lot of spoilers, but it's a great review. So thank you. But if you want to read that one, note there's a lot of spoilers in it. So, but no, we really appreciate people helping get the word out. And hopefully we can keep doing this and making even better and better issues going forward.
Nice. And so how could somebody get a hold of 1 if they wanted to catch up on 1 and grab number 2 through the Kickstarter now?
Conor, do you want to take that one?
Well, through the Kickstarter, you can go, there's the option to get the double package. Basically, there's a pledge, a tier where you can get issues, either digital or print, issues of issue 1 and 2. So you can always catch up.
Sweet.
There's a lot of first prints there. We have some variant covers left. Conor and Finn did this amazing Secret Romance inspired retro cover in honor of Valentine's Day. So we have some really cool rewards and exclusive things that we're only going to offer on Kickstarter. So they become collectibles. We had one that's a limited promo print. We actually did a print run of 25 issues for 25 copies of issue number 2, and those have been flying out really quick. I think we're down to 1 or 2 of those left. And because it's a Kickstarter exclusive. So yeah.
Yeah, I see you guys have a lot of like original artwork and lots of other really fun things. Especially I like those Valentine's cards you guys have put together. So it's a lot of really cool incentives on here.
One of the things that we're trying to do with the Kickstarter incentives is we're trying to build the town as a real place, like you were talking about. The rewards that we had in the first campaign, you could actually get a piece of coal from the White Ash mine, and it came with a certificate of authenticity. You could buy stock in the mine. We have postcards from your favorite locations in White Ash. This time around, you have some of those things, but we also have coasters from the diner, the local diner in town. We have the Valentine's Day cards. So yeah, like we want to make it feel like a real place, and we have the move to town reward, and we reach out to people and they're like, move to town, be part of what we're building here. Like that's we're all White Ashians, one big team. So
yeah, it is really, really awesome looking through all the rewards that are there and everything that you've put together there. It's definitely no wonder so many people have backed it because they're getting a lot for it. So it's definitely worth it. And I guess kind of keep going with that Kickstarter, and it sounds like I was hearing it, but what would you give somebody who's trying to break into the business now, maybe trying to do their own comic book? what would be your advice?
Conor, do you want to start with that one, or?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, I would definitely say, I'd say pairing up with somebody is definitely a very good idea. I think putting 2 heads together, or 3 heads, or 4 heads, even better. I think you're going to reap the benefits of your collective knowledge, and like collective inspirations and influences. I would say so. Yeah, I'd say definitely pairing up with people would be a big thing. And then I just say start creating, start getting your stuff out there. I think there's a podcast I used to listen to more frequently, and it's make it and show everybody. You know, I think I especially have a tendency to make, but then not necessarily show. And I think there are probably other people out there like that, especially in comics, because I think we tend to be a more introverted crowd. So make it and show everybody, and get it out on like Tumblr. I mean, like, I think Twitch is a great place to be able to build at least somewhat of a community of people, to have a sense of, you know, what I really like about Twitch is that and streaming on Twitch is that you get a sort of sense of being like in a bullpen, kind of like, say, in the Jack Kirby days, like where everyone would go to work and then there would be like 6 or 7 people, and like they'd be showing each other stuff. And there are ways of doing that now, like with a real studio, but Twitch replicates that in a way that if you were, say, out in the middle of nowhere, like, you couldn't necessarily do that. So yeah, I'd say just find other collaborators, other people, even if you don't necessarily want to be on a team. Be working alongside other people and get their insight, and that way, because you're going to encourage each other. You're going to compete, and you're going to encourage, and so that creates a very powerful force to move forward. Because you can often, especially in comics, because there's a lot to catch up on. I think with comics, like, if you've never drawn a horse, hey, you've got to start really knowing how to draw horses, because like that's what you're going to have to draw if you're going to draw like a fantasy comic, right? Or if you're, you know, like say if you're going to make a fantasy comic, you really have to start knowing like period costume and like armor and weapons and like how people might behave and like lots of different things. And so there's a lot to catch up on there. So I think working with other people is a great way to go. And then let's see, taking that forward. Well, Charlie, I'll let you continue from there.
I would say, first of all, like, Conor's Twitch stream is great. What I've seen on the Twitch stream is I've seen a lot of people who've come and learned from Conor and from some of the other artists. It really is like an artist collective, and they give each other notes and like Conor said, push each other. And so I've seen such improvement from a lot of the other artists who come to visit and chat and talk. And so they're learning their craft working with other people. So I think that's really great. If you're a young artist or a writer, this is the best time to ever be one of those things, because it's so much easier now to get your material out so people can see you than it ever has been before.
Absolutely.
And I think if you're a writer, if you're an artist, you have to remember it's free. The only thing that you have to spend to do these things is your time. Because you can find a free place to post your webcomic. You can find, you know, like, you know, if you don't have an internet connection, you can go to a coffee shop and put these things online. You can go to the library and you can upload them. So I think it's about doing your craft and sharing your craft. I mean, you never get better at something unless you're practicing. So if you're looking to be a writer, you need to write. If you're looking to be an artist, you need to draw. If you can do both, great. If you're looking for a collaborator, I mean, there are so many places on the internet where people are looking for each other. Both, you know, like there's Reddit has a thread, and I think this is one of the places that maybe Conor and I might have met, because I posted in about 3 or 4 different places this really detailed, you know, thing of what I was looking for in an artist. But you also see a lot of people in the Reddit comic book collaborations thread who are like, hey, I've never drawn anything before, but I'm looking to be a comic book artist. I want to get started. Is there a writer who could give me a story I could work with? And then be a writer who said, oh, you know what? I've only done 1 or 2 stories. Maybe we can work together and create something. Or there's this anthology that's accepting submissions. So you see a lot of people meeting each other online, which is great. But it's, you know, to do anything, you need to do it with regularity. That's why I think web comics are great. And you can really build up a following if you post on a daily basis or 3 times a week or whatever your schedule is, and you stick to it and people know what's coming out and you get better at it and it's good, people will find you. And so it's a lot easier to promote your work now and find places where you can promote your work. If you're looking to do something outside of comics, say like television writing or film writing, that's a little bit trickier. I've done both of those, and what I will tell you, if you're really looking to work in the film or entertainment industry, and most of you are going to hate hearing this, you need to move to Los Angeles. Because that is where all the work is. That is where all the contacts happen. That's where all the networking occurs. That's where people get hired. So I've been out here for a long time. I've seen it. It's such an outlier when someone breaks into the film or entertainment industry, or even the animation industry as a writer, without moving to Los Angeles. Comics you can do from anywhere, so we'll stick with that. And I think you can be found online on the web, but yeah, so.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, we've got a question actually in our chat here from Mick Byers. He says, where can fans interact with you guys outside of the Kickstarter? I know you guys mentioned the Twitch a little bit. Could you maybe talk more on that, or other places that you guys can be interacted with? Well,
I will say that Conor has a fairly regular Twitch stream, and I'm there semi-regularly. There's some amazing regulars. There's this one guy, McCormicker, who has a really great site, and he does some amazing fantasy art too, and he's really fun to interact with. You know, he has a tendency to wear these cut-off shirts, which showcase, you know, how muscular he thinks he is. But you know, there's a really fun assortment of characters that you can play with, and you know, and this has become a little family that people like to, you know, just hang out and talk. So the Twitch place is really great. I'm also on Twitter. I'm always happy to give people advice or about writing or anything over Twitter. So please feel free to reach out to me. I can give you the URL, or you probably, I was tagged when you tweeted out the thing tonight. So Conor, any other thoughts about where people can find you?
I'd say Twitch is probably the safest bet, you know, as far as like outreach goes. I mean, we're streaming twice a day normally, during the weekdays at least, and so that's a great place to come and reach out.
Awesome. And what about any events, any cons? Are you guys going to be doing any Comic Cons or anything this year?
We're at San Diego. We're going to be at San Diego this summer, so we're really excited about that. We're going to have a table in the independent press section. And so if you're at Comic-Con, please come find us. We'll be there.
That's awesome. That's the big show. So
yeah, that's a great stage.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's an amazing opportunity.
It's actually where Conor and I are going to meet each other in person for the first time. Because Thursday we spent many hours talking back and forth like this and chatting back and forth. But and I've had several friends who have met him in New York, but we personally have not interacted. And so we're looking forward to, you know, at the show, so to speak, you know, getting together.
Oh man, 21st century. That's crazy. Yeah, so that'll be good. And then one of the questions we like to ask everybody when we're getting on the show is, what are you currently reading? What are you guys reading right now? Conor, what do you got?
Well, right now, what I got on my desk anyway is Batman White Knight. I mean, like, this is only issue 1, and I'm going to pick up the subsequent issues like as soon as I can. But I mean, he's just doing a magnum opus here. This is really fantastic stuff. And then what else I have on my desk right now is Lobster Johnson. I'm sort of reading that. I think Tonshi Zonchik's work is just absolutely phenomenal. I think his work here on Lobster Johnson, and then Who and Where is Jake Ellis? Like, there's 2 different issues or whatever series. It's just absolutely phenomenal. I think it's just a masterclass in, I guess he's like, I think people have called him the cinema photographer of like comics. You know, he's sort of like, he's very much in that vein because he's such a old school movie guy, and I guess he just brings all that into comics in such an interesting way.
Nice.
That's really cool. Yeah.
And I would say I really like a lot of Ryan K. Vaughan's stuff. So obviously Saga and Paper Girls. If you haven't read Why the Last Man, it's really worth going back and checking that run out. And then I'll throw a couple of more indie titles out at you guys. Pat Shand has this Kickstarter and also this comic for this book called Destiny New York. He's also doing something new right now for Black Mask, but he's worth checking out. And Destiny New York is kind of like it's also a grounded sort of magical fantasy set in New York City, and it's excellent, really well written. So that's and White Ash. I'm reading a lot of White Ash. I'd like to go back and look at Conor's artwork and say, oh my goodness, he makes me look good. So,
and that guy that write it, it's funny, it's hilarious, it's got a good story, and it's something that everybody should be checking out. In the links down below, we have some links to White Ash, to the Kickstarter. Make sure you're touching base with those and supporting these guys. It's all worth it. You're gonna want to do it. You won't be disappointed. That's a big piece.
Yeah, absolutely. We can't say enough praise for this book. It is really an awesome book, you guys. You guys have done great work. I mean, it's just awesome, and I think everybody should, get in there and at least get that catch up, incentive there, because
there's, honestly, there's a digital PDF. If you just want to try it and not do a big pledge, there's a digital file that you can, if you like it, then come back the next time we're on Kickstarter and pick up some print copies. Please just check us out. I think you'll really like what you find.
Can't say that anymore. And I want to thank you guys for jumping on, doing your art, and I praise you for doing this medium that we all get to enjoy, and choosing your talents to do this, because there's many other things like TV and animation and all that other stuff, or graphic arts for the UN and other stuff that you could be doing. But you're choosing to do this, and I thank you for that.
Well, thank you guys.
Yeah, we really appreciate you having us on.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And if you guys got questions for them, please follow both Conor and Charlie. And we want to thank you guys for jumping on today. Make sure you're catching them at Twitch, Twitter, and you're also subscribing to us on this. And
yes,
also
please
check
subscribe.
out Outright Geekery as well. We are connected with there. So thank you guys over at Outright Geekery. And again, thank you guys at White Ash.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jared. Thanks, Hooser.